Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. This is Life Coach Myrna Young, and you're listening to Author's Corner, where we highlight and showcase local authors. Today, I'm speaking to Joel Dubin, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies. And Joel and I are going to be talking on the topic, how dysfunctional is your company? Calculating the a-hole density ratio. And I said that nicely. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Myrna. I'm glad to be a guest on your program.
Hey, you're very welcome. All right. Well, let me give you a brief introduction. Joel Dubin is a retired cybersecurity consultant and adult survivor of the corporate world, turned humor author. He developed The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies from decades of observing messed up companies around the world. He is fluent in several languages and is also available to speak about working in multilingual and multicultural environments. All right. So, Joel, as we start off, let's take some time now and just touch on what makes companies dysfunctional. In your summary of your book, you list quite a few things. You talk about nonsensical policies and procedures, office warfare, excessive emails and pointless meetings, incoherent communications, bad customer service and marketing, and poor treatment of employees. And I'm sure that is just the top of the echelon, that there a lot of more things that makes companies dysfunctional. But you know, being in the corporate world myself for several decades, I can tell that you've picked the top ones. So do you want to touch on a few of these, or you want to touch on all of them? What did you find?
I'll touch as many as I can. And Myrna is a fellow corporate. Sounds like you're a fellow corporate survivor. You've been through the mill as well. You know, but the one thing that you missed in the list was meetings. And one of my habits is, if you're not in a meeting, you will be assigned to one. I mean, I saw people that were in endless meetings, so I created these characters called meeting police that had little armbands that said MP, and they were standing in the hall, and if they caught someone in the hall, they'd throw them into a meeting, even if it had nothing to do with their work. But
yeah,
the key thing is just that a lot of these companies, they're very bureaucratic, and what happens is it ends up being a lot of office politics, a lot of office warfare, toxic work environments, and so on. You know, I went to a top business school, and I'm not saying that to brag about it, but the one thing that they didn't teach that they should teach, that I think is a fundamental thing in this book, is psychology. Because a lot of the problems in companies are people problems and personality problems, people with power issues. You know, I talk about turf battles are a fundamental part of our corporate culture. I mean, I saw companies where, you know, people were building little fiefdoms, little kingdoms, little nests, bird nests within their company. And I wanted to sometimes grab them on the shoulders and shake them and say, do you know what business we're in? What are we doing? You know, we're not doing business anymore. We're kind of building little teams that are fighting each other on the courts, you know. And so that's a big thing. I talk about communication. So the essence there is I talked about excessive emails. You know, you walk in the office in the morning, you got all these emails. It's the first thing you do. You're not doing any work because you're responding to emails, half of which are nonsense, you know, or answering the same question 5 times, or customer complaints, which are common in the dysfunctional company because you're not providing the service very well, you know. And then after that, the next level beyond emails is, you know, meetings. You know, as I mentioned, you know, people constantly being in meetings. I talk about poor customer service. You know, the twin enemies of the dysfunctional company are its employees and its customers. So the key thing that a dysfunctional company tries to do is drive away its customers and then drive its employees nuts, or take the quality employees and try to drive them out. Because you can't have creative, independent thinkers within a dysfunctional organization. So I have a lot of different flavors on all of that. The longest chapter is the one about, you know, the poor treatment of employees. I talk about poor hiring practices. You know, nowadays, everything is automated. You know, you go to a website, you see a job, you send a resume, it could disappear into outer space. You have no clue where it's going, and clearly systems are set up to not be able to pick out ideal candidates. If you have anything creative or interesting in your resume, it's going to be cut out. How do they hire people? So Myrna kind of runs the gamut of all of these different things. And the 7 habits kind of developed. I noticed these same patterns over and over and over again through all the years that I was working with these companies. And that's how I developed these habits. It kind of started out at one company on a whiteboard, just as things would happen every day. I write them down, and then eventually I formed these 7 habits. It's just something that was in common over and over again.
Okay. So let's pick one of those. Let's pick the one that I believe is it's a big one, right? The emails. My daughter is still in the corporate world, and people send her emails at 10 o'clock at night, and she's reading them before she goes to bed. And then if there's a problem, then she can't sleep. So yeah, so how do you, I'm assuming that when in your book, when you touch on these dysfunctions, you're offering some solutions. So how do companies get rid of the incessant, emails and meetings?
2 types of I call them vertical communication disturbances and horizontal communication disturbances. So the vertical ones come from on high. That comes from the mountaintop above the clouds, usually executives in isolated ivory towers. They're saying this thing or that thing. And one of the things that you can see often in a dysfunctional company, a lot of people with neck braces, because they're going like this and like that. What did they say today? What did they say tomorrow? It's something different, so you don't know what your company's doing. I'd say cut down on that stuff. That's one thing that, you don't have to, send out every other day. We're doing this, we're doing that. Do a newsletter once a month or something like that, and keep it down to the bare essentials. The horizontal ones are the ones where between coworkers themselves, in a dysfunctional organization where you have so many layers of bureaucracy, and then laid on top of that is what I call silos that don't communicate with each other. When you have a lack of internal communication, antagonistic departments, there isn't any coordination, it's a natural that you're going to have excessive kinds of emails. And what you're mentioning about your daughter getting emails at 10 o'clock at night, amazingly, I was at one company where I had one enlightened manager who, if someone sent an email after 5 o'clock, he would discipline them because he said, this is it, you're done at 5 o'clock. And I know what you're talking about, because now in kind of our high-tech, internet-based world, there is no breaks anymore. You get emails at 10 o'clock. And I was doing business internationally, and, the world is open 24 hours,
Yeah.
So if someone is having breakfast somewhere, around the world, you're always getting some sort of an email. So I would say the fundamental issue, if you can increase internal communication, internal cooperation, you'll have a lot less emails, and people kind of will be, all on the same page. So that's the big thing.
But I like that one. No emails after 5 o'clock. That's an amazing thing to implement.
Yeah.
That you tell people not to call you after 9, then I think that they should not have no emails after 5 o'clock, because guess what? The reason she's reading the emails at 10 o'clock is because we all have these notifications. I'm wearing a Fitbit. If I was, in the corporate world and someone sends me an email at 10 o'clock, it comes to my phone, to my watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, these things disrupt your sleep and disrupt. So that's actually a good one to say, even if they don't cut it off at 5, cut it off at 7 or something. But you're right. Don't be getting up at 2 a.m. and sending an email, because there's a lot of people that don't sleep and do that. Right?
Yeah. No, I got emails in the middle of the night, and then I come in the morning and I see all these emails. I should actually check in with that manager to see if he's still working at that company, because it's such a progressive idea that it's definitely bound to get him fired. And I also talk about, for what I call in that very same habit where I say poor communication delivers the message, it's habit 3, is that, a lot of these companies use their own language. I call it corporate speak. All of these things like, I'll pencil it in, or, all these crazy terms that you hear over and over again, like when someone is put on probation, it's called a performance improvement program. I called it a PIP. Just say you're on probation, and employees are called. Why can't you just say staff? What the hell is FTE? I hear that all the time. I actually don't even know what FTE stands for, Just say we need people instead of we need FTE, or actualization or little downside. Well, in some companies, little downsides means that you got to have a longer skirt or a longer pants, and HR doesn't even flinch when they see that.
Right.
What is these? So I talk a lot about what I call corp speak, and I actually have a dictionary of acronyms in the back of the book because I create all of these crazy acronyms, because I say a company should speak only in acronyms if possible to shorten the.
Well, they tell you never to speak with acronyms to the customer because some of them use the same language when you're speaking to customers, and customers have no clue what they're talking about. But I guess what they're saying is that you can use it internally if someone else knows what you're talking about. But I see where you're coming from that, right? Because, if it's a habit. So when you start speaking to your coworkers or your boss about these acronyms, then you go out and put it in an email or you talk to your customer about it, and they don't know what you're talking about. All right.
And it's just, it's essential that within the dysfunctional company, different departments have different acronyms, so they can't even talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. Cut it out totally. I hear what you're saying. All right. Now, the one that I like, and that's why I made it our headline, is that you're saying that how can companies calculate the asshole density ratio, or ADR, to determine their level of dysfunction? What is the asshole density ratio?
Well, okay, that's the number of assholes per square mile, per square foot within the company.
So how it works? Who determines that they're an asshole?
Well, it is a humor book, Myrna, so it's kind of, there's artistic license there, so you kind of have to make your personal judgment calls. But what I talk about, and just kind of as a footnote, I talk about in the office. I actually was close to completing the book just before COVID, and then when COVID hit, I had nothing in there about remote work, so I added all the stuff about remote work. So the reason I'm kind of making that little digression there, I'll explain how you calculate the ADR for remote workers as well. But in an office, you get them from your cubicle, because generally you're kind of in a cubicle farm there, right? And then you walk 100 steps in each direction, and then you count the number of assholes that are within that square radius. You have to include, if there isn't executives nearby, which frequently is the case in the dysfunctional company, what I call the ESF, the executive supplemental factor, where you throw in, a number of executives that you consider assholes, and you take that and you divide it by the total number of people within that square area.
The question is, what makes someone an asshole? What is the qualifier?
Well, my habit number 7, where I talk about how the company doesn't serve the common good, I talk about all of the various swamp creatures that work within the company and all of the different personalities. And probably the main one, the top one, I call the megalomaniac. Usually a narcissist who's power hungry, and that's all they're interested is their own self-interest and power. They're people that climb the ladders. You can also pick them up because they'll often have a rear view mirror attached to their shoulder so they can see who's trying to stab them in the back when they're not trying to stab someone else in the back. And I talk about sky watchers. I ran into this quite a bit, where people that were great managers, but they managed up, not down. They treated their staff like garbage. They didn't pay attention to them. They stole their ideas. They were condescending, but they were great ass kissers for everybody above them. And then there's, other things that are kind of obvious, people that are complete idiots that were, they might have got to that position because of nepotism or office politics. They weren't qualified, or they didn't care, and they just were not good managers. So that's Myrna. That's kind of how I defined it. I kind of leave that to the end, because what I created was this program within the dysfunctional company called the Asshole Management Development Training Program. I call it, for short, the acronym is AMDTAP. So that's kind of the program that develops and trains these people to be released out to the world after the company collapses, which it eventually does.
All right. Well, listen, I'm buying the asshole thing here, because the ones that you mentioned is very true. I mean, and corporations are, listen, it is a community on its own, right? It's a live entity. And there's a lot of people that are walking around that are hurting other people. And I love when you say narcissistic, power hungry people. They've got them all there. So, and it's usually your boss.
Well, the pyramid structure of the dysfunctional company kind of lends itself to that because, you have sharp elbows where you need sharp elbows to kind of edge aside people so you can go make your way up to the top. Because as it gets narrower and narrower, and there's fewer and fewer opportunities to kind of rise up. And so that's why, you have to have those sharp elbows to push people aside, and you've got to be kind of aggressive and rough. It's not conducive to creative, independent type thinking. Those people, anyways, I talk about, in poor treatment of employees in Habit 6, those people should be weeded out in the hiring process as well. Anybody that says they're a team player, throw the resume out. We don't want that kind of crap in our company.
Yeah. It's funny you said, but the hiring process. I mean, right now, I remember when in 2015, I was working with a career person because I'd lost my job. I didn't go back to work. I started working for myself, but I'd lost my job, and when the company was downsizing, and when they lost your job, they gave you, access to like a career coach or something. And I was very surprised about how now you get into jobs where you're right. There's like 200 people applying for a job, and they've got this. I'm not sure if it's called AI now, but they've got something that reads the resumes, and all they're doing is picking out keywords. So you can put your resume in such a way that it grabs the attention of the non-human sorter or the computer. And you're right. You turn out to be a very bad hire because you know how to pad your resume. If now when people are interviewing one-on-one, they can pick out those type of people. You know what I mean? So it's true.
And AI is going to make it worse. AI is making it worse because it predates AI, Myrna. They had systems that would pick out keywords. So I always say, well, before I get to that, is that I always say just try to put the word asshole right in the middle of the resume. It'll be picked up. They'll say, that's the candidate we want. Bring him in, bring him or her in for an interview. But I always say my serious advice is that, I've gotten all of my jobs, many years through networking, right? Through networking. So if you're use your alumni association. I went to an MBA. I went to Kellogg. I had networks through that. Use your professional association. In IT security, cybersecurity, there's various trade organizations. I would go to meetings. I would network. I always was out there. You should always be prepared with a resume and a plan because you never know when that corporate angel of death is going to tap you on the shoulder and escort you out the door. And it doesn't matter what level.
I've been in the corporate environment for like 8 years or something, and I'm pretty sure it's changing. But in my day, yes, you networked. That's what LinkedIn got its start from. I mentioned you said that you're still heavily on LinkedIn because your social networks. You would go out to networking events with your business card and talk to people. And you actually couldn't get a job unless you know somebody.
Well,
I'm not sure how it works now. Yes.
Many jobs, for instance, even where I network, they would say, well, what you saw online, you still have to apply. You have to go through the procedure. So your resume is in there. But the difference is he or she, the hiring manager who you met, will say, you know what, I'll tag it now. I'll pull it out of the system and I'll put you on the pile or the top of the pile. So you may still have to go through that process. I guess what I'm saying is that you got to network. You just can't go, oh, I like that job. That looks good. That looks like
never get it.
Send a resume.
Never get it.
Never know.
200 people applying for a job, or it's probably even more. But all right, so that's good. Now, like I said, I love you said you're a humor writer, and it sounds like you are very humorous. And you say that all good things come to an end, and there are procedures to get rid of employees who haven't expired yet in meetings or at their desks. Of course, those who do perish must still be propped up at their workstations as an example to others. And so what advice do you have for companies to get rid of employees who are not pulling their weight? There's a lot of dead weight people that don't do anything, and you know them because they're being propped up, and you know that they're not doing all their work. They're delegating everything or whatever they do. So yeah, how do we get rid of them?
In the dysfunctional company, it's really like a conveyor belts, like musical chairs. You get any work, well, that's not my department. I'll transfer on to the next one. That just goes on and on. So, my point in there, that's interesting you asked that question, Myrna, because I think my point was not so much, about how there definitely are times that people aren't performing and they need to be removed. Absolutely. I'd never question that. Is that it's just sometimes it never made sense. I saw outstanding employees, all of a sudden they'd be called in the manager's office, and the next thing is they're packing their box and walking out the door, and I'd like scratching my head, like, why are they letting you go when they should be letting that moron go? That kind of a thing. So I guess what I would say is that the best way to do it, here I'm kind of contradicting myself. I talk about the performance improvement program. You need to kind of work with the employee and see if you're seeing substandard work, and kind of say, look, this is not working out. Let's see how we can improve this. And if not, then we'll help you move on. This is not the place for you, that kind of a thing. So I think there's a way to do it in either a humane fashion or a way where there's kind of a period where the employee can kind of get ready because they see that the handwriting's on the wall. Too often also you get these mergers and acquisitions and these reorganizations that never made sense. I always looked at employees. I come into a company and work with the same team, and every time I was in there, I was in there once, and then I'd come in 6 months later for the next review. Oh, we have a new manager. We have a new boss. We report to a new department. It's like employees in this sea of management goo, and it was just crazy. So the answer to the question is that, you kind of have to see the level of work. You have to be honest about how the work is going. If this person is not a good fit, you need to kind of address that, nip that in the bud right away in kind of a humane approach to maybe get them out the door or help direct them in the correct direction. Or maybe it's an internal move too. Maybe they need to go somewhere else. Their skill set is not appropriate for this. They need to be moved somewhere else. But that's the key thing, is to kind of be prepared so that when these things happen, you can move on.
Well, all right. Well, I'm thinking if they're propped up at their desk and they're like dead.
Well, I talk
bury them. But I mean, I understand that. In the corporate world, I was usually a salesperson, and a salesperson, they go by their numbers, and if you're not performing, they get rid of you. But you're correct. Even a salesperson that's not performing and they can't sell, maybe they're a good customer service person. Or, I mean, if you're running a humane company, you will see that maybe this person doesn't have the strength for this particular job description, but they have strength for something else, and you transfer them, or you whatever, instead of saying, hey, pack your box and go. So,
one of the things I saw as dysfunctional companies in the sales organization, now that you mentioned that, is that either not enough training, so the salesperson didn't know, what to do. And then this thing of, I understand you want to keep production high. As soon as they reached a level, they'd raise the bar. Oh, cut your commissions.
Really?
And it's kind of like, the beatings will stop when morale improves, and I know particularly in tech, that they could be absolutely ruthless, and they just keep raising the bar to a point where it's unrealistic.
And you know why they raise the bar? Because they don't want to pay commissions.
Yeah.
Because what does a salesperson work on? Commissions, right? And if they see you're crushing it, they raise the bar so that, yes, it happens all the time. You're very right. Yes.
And in terms of burying those employees that are propped up at their desk, so that's the responsibility of what I call row captains. You go into the dysfunctional company, it's like a sea of all these cubicles. So each cubicle is divided into a set of rows, and there's usually what I call a row captain. One person who's responsible for walking up and down the rows, kind of like a prison ward, prison guard, just to make sure everybody's sitting at their desk. If they find an employee that kind of expired from too much work, first of all, they have to leave the employee there so that other employees can see, if you're working hard, this is what can happen to you. This is an example. But then when the employee starts getting moldy, it's the row captain's responsibility to arrange for them to be buried and removed.
That's very funny. Yes, listen, humor writing is good. We're talking about some serious stuff, but we're making it humorous.
It's therapy.
This is good. I love it.
It's therapy.
All right. So your book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies. I know that you were a retired cybersecurity consultant. So why did you write it? And what do you want? Who you expect to read it? And what do you want them to walk away with? Who's your target audience?
Okay. So basically the reason I wrote it was, as I say, it was kind of like therapy. I did feel like many times there was frustrations where I was banging my head against the wall, either working with clients, some of my clients, and then companies that I worked for as well. Although the most recent company that I was at, Coal Fire Systems, was a very well-run company. You had management in touch, and you had, a lot of employee participation. It was a very good, well-run operation. But beyond that, I think it was, for me, Myrna, a lot of it was therapy. I was carrying around all of this stuff for all these years, and instead of kind of jumping out a window or kind of, slashing my wrist, I thought I better put it in writing. And, once I retired, the book has a lot of meat in it. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it was very cathartic, and it took me, about a year to do. My target audience is really anybody that works for any kind of a company. To some degree, every company has its dysfunctional side. To some degree, even well-run companies, there's always some quirk in there. I do find that I get a lot of positive feedback from people that work in offices, regular employees. That's definitely the case. Now, executives, I've had a couple have read it, and they've actually liked it. I expected, pushback, like, oh, that's not my company. We're not like that, that kind of thing. And I had one executive, a former executive from, just by chance, that he happens to be a friend of mine, retired now, worked for a big Fortune 500 company. He said, the book sounds like angry. Were you angry? I said, oh, yes, I was. You picked that out. It was a way for me to vent my frustration, But, he said to me that, when he was at the company, it was pretty well run. And then after he had left, there were a number of management changes after he retired. And the company he used to work for, he did admit was pretty messed up, and he felt that a lot of management that he had worked with that had come in after he left had needed to be changed because they just didn't seem to grasp the nettle, so to speak. So my target audience is anybody that really has worked in an office or worked for a company. It's kind of, along all of that, like Office Space and that kind of a thing, all that kind of mentality. So.
Yeah, well, I think the greatest change can be made through management, which is why I asked the question. If you're targeting it to supervisors and CEOs and management, but you're right that it's the first thing to do is become aware of the dysfunction. So if you are an employee and you're in one of those cubicles, and then you understand that your boss is one of these assholes, I don't know what you're saying that information, but now you're aware of it.
No, definitely. And it's also comic relief as well, so you kind of can laugh at your situation because, entrepreneurism and leaving work and going on, it's not for everybody. A lot of people say, oh, you got to be on your own. Well, it's not for everybody. Some people work best in organization or they're just not able, or they don't have, some great idea. I think one of the key things, though, underlying all of it, is when we talk about management, is management that's isolated and out of touch. I talk a lot about, the executives being in bunkers or in ivory towers, or, they're in underground facilities. They never, you never see them, or they have these town halls, so the executive comes out and they're flanked by all these assistants, just like the president coming out with the Secret Service, and someone asks a question and it's not the right question, or it's, something uncomfortable. Security people will scoop up that employee and drag him into the parking lot, and then afterwards, the assistants go away and the executive goes back, behind a curtain, and you never see him or her again. And then you think, do they work for the same company? Do they really know what's going on down here? Not all companies are like that. I don't want to give that impression, but those that are dangerously dysfunctional. And then they wonder why they can't get ahead.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, like I said, it sounds like a good read and very humorous, and obviously, giving some good information on fixing these dysfunctional companies. And I love where you borrowed from one of the top books, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Now you have the 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies. I love it.
Thank you, Myrna.
Yes, I love it. All right. Okay, guys. So I enjoyed my conversation with Joel here today. Go pick up a copy of this book. I will have a transcript of my conversation with Joel on the show page, which is myhelps.us. I will link out to his book. I will link out to his website. And I will link out to his social media. He's on LinkedIn. What is your website, Joel?
It's dysfunctionalcompany.com.
Company dot what?
Dysfunctionalcompany.com. Singular. Yeah, dysfunctionalcompany.com.
All right. Excellent. So I will link out to it. So yeah, go pick up a copy of this book if you're in the corporate world at all. And you'll learn some tips to make your life better and your company better. So I'm glad I was able to highlight and showcase this author. So thank you guys for tuning in. Joel, as we wrap up, any last words?
No, thank you very much for having me here. I hope that your listeners at least get a few laughs before they decide to hang themselves from working at their company. So.
Yes, humor is therapy. All right. Well, listen, thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.
Thank you.